Hidden beneath the endless rainforest that is the Amazon, archaeologists have known for years that there are the remains of hundreds of geometric earthworks created by a pre-colonial civilization. These earthworks consist of massive circles, squares, and interconnected structures that were carved into the landscape thousands of years ago. The problem was that these usually appeared only when modern deforestation accidentally exposed them. Now researchers have used Lidar to uncover even more of these remarkable earthworks, and their findings suggest that southwestern Amazonia alone may contain more than 20,000 of these monumental structures. That's roughly as many as scientists had previously estimated for the entire Amazon basin. The study also proposes that between 1.25 and 3 million people likely lived in this region around 2,000 years ago. In this video, I discuss this fascinating new research, examine how LiDAR is transforming our understanding of the ancient Amazon, and ask how millions of people were able to live and thrive in one of the world's densest rainforests. Over the years, the discovery of hundreds of earthworks in the Amazon has changed researchers' understanding of urbanism in the tropical forests of South America. These earthworks are found in both the floodplains and the interfluvial hinterland, areas that supported dense human populations. It's thought that the pre-colonial population of Greater Amazonia, a region covering 6.7 million square kilometers, was around 5 to 10 million people. Previous studies using a combination of high-resolution satellite imagery and aerial photography found almost 1,300 earthworks covering an area of 134,000 square kilometers in the northern part of southwest Amazonia. The civilization that built these earthworks has been designated as the Aquiry. Most of these earthworks consist of geometric patterns likely reflecting a common socio-cosmology and date back to roughly 2,500 years ago. However, some are mound villages and embanked enclosures without ditches, which date to much later in the early second millennium. This figure is from an earlier paper that also discussed the monuments. A and B are geometric earthworks. C shows a mound village with radiating roads built alongside an earlier geometric structure. In 2024, LiDAR surveys in the Brazilian states of Acre and Amazonas were carried out to calculate the geographical extent of the Acre society. 432 earthworks were identified, 36 of which had been known about previously. By combining this new data with earlier research, the authors of the paper were able to work out how far the Acre civilization stretched, what sort of population it had at its peak, and to extrapolate how many earthworks there likely are in total, and how the Acre earthworks can be distinguished from later ones. The earthworks, which are sometimes referred to as geoglyphs, were constructed between 600 BCE and 850. Their sizes mostly vary between 0.3 and 14 hectares. However, one particular outlier covers a huge 50 hectares. These earthworks are made up of a ditch and an embankment, which may be inside or outside of the ditch. So they have similarities to henge monuments, of which there are hundreds in the United Kingdom and Ireland. The ditches range between 9 and 13 meters in width and are as deep as 5 meters. Most monuments stand alone, but some are in clusters and are connected to others. The new research showed that embanked enclosures without ditches are more common than previously thought, but were difficult to detect before with satellite imagery. These also have quadrilateral and multilateral shapes, so probably belong to the Acre civilization as well, whereas roundish embankments have been dated to later. These monuments were likely used as ceremonial centers and public gathering places rather than permanent settlements. There is little evidence that they were continuously occupied or built for defense. Instead, they may have functioned much like the meeting places of the Andean Inca state, where dispersed communities periodically came together for ceremonies, feasting, trade, and other collective activities. In this sense, pre-colonial urbanity was very different from the densely built cities we often imagine. Rather than being concentrated in a single urban centre, populations were spread across the landscape, but connected through monumental ceremonial sites, extensive networks, and shared cultural traditions. Such massive construction projects could only have been achieved with a large workforce and an understanding of mathematics and geometry. This style of earthwork construction went on for almost 1,500 years, so must have served an important function in the community, likely related to administration, socio-cultural activities such as art, dance, music and sport, and cosmological beliefs. One of the main goals of the study was to determine just how far the Aquiry civilization extended across the Amazon. To answer that question, the researchers flew Lidar surveys over regions where archaeologists suspected hidden earthworks might exist beneath the forest. Surprisingly, in several of these areas they found nothing. While it's possible that dense vegetation obscured some features, the absence of earthworks suggests that parts of the rainforest may have acted as buffer zones, separating different populations. By combining these new LiDAR surveys with previously known archaeological sites, the researchers were able to map the likely limits of the Acre civilization much more confidently than before. This defines a vast cultural landscape stretching across southwestern Amazonia. Archaeologists were able to detect hundreds of previously unknown earthworks hidden beneath the canopy. They were also able to triple the geographic region of the Aquiry from 60,000 to 183,000 square kilometers. The surveys also revealed an important pattern. Earthworks were far more concentrated around the Rio Branco region, while they became much less common further north towards La Brea. Although the denser forest in some areas made it harder for the laser to detect smaller features, the largest monuments would still have been visible. This suggests that the decrease in earthworks is real, marking the edge of the Aquiry cultural landscape rather than simply reflecting a lack of visibility beneath the forest. One of the most important findings from the LiDAR data was that previous surveys had majorly underestimated the number of earthworks. In areas where the forest had already been cleared, LiDAR revealed around 5 times more structures than researchers had previously identified using satellite imagery alone. Their calculations suggest that southwestern Amazonia may contain tens of thousands of these monumental structures. Rather than being isolated features scattered through the forest, these earthworks appear to be part of a vast and interconnected cultural landscape created by a large and organized pre-colonial society. The scale of these discoveries also encouraged researchers to rethink the population of the ancient Amazon. Earlier estimates were based on just a few hundred known earthworks, but with many more structures now identified and thousands estimated to still lie hidden, the population number needed to be reconsidered. By looking at the size, distribution, and dating of the earthworks, the researchers focused on the period when the Acre civilization appears to have reached its peak, around the 2nd to the 4th centuries. They estimate that a significant proportion of these monuments were being used at the same time, and that each one would have required a community of people to build and maintain them. Based on these calculations, they propose that the region may have supported a population of around 1.25 to 3 million people at its peak, with the possibility that the true number was even higher. If correct, this would completely transform our understanding of pre-colonial Amazonia. It's been many years since researchers thought of the ancient Amazon as an untouched wilderness. Plenty of work has been carried out, which shows that it was fairly densely inhabited thousands of years ago. However, these new research projects are helping us to further understand the scale and complexity of these societies. To test their population estimates, the researchers also looked at later settlements that appeared in the same region centuries after the Aquiry earthworks were built. These mound villages were not the same as the earlier ceremonial monuments, but they provide a useful comparison because they were created by communities with similar traditions, similar farming practices, and similar ways of living. By studying the size of these later settlements, the researchers estimated that an average community may have consisted of a few hundred people. This supports their earlier estimate that each major earthwork could have been associated with a sizable community rather than just a small group of builders. The researchers also point out that these numbers are consistent with indigenous traditions from the region today, where large ceremonial gatherings involving hundreds of people still take place. Together, these comparisons suggest that the Aquiry earthworks were important meeting centres. One of the long-standing arguments against large populations in the Amazon is that the rainforest soils are too poor to support them. But the researchers argue that this wasn't the case in the Acre region. The soils here are among the most fertile in the Amazon, and archaeological evidence shows that people cultivated a range of crops, including maize, squash, manioc, beans, peanuts, and sweet potatoes, whilst also managing forests rich in useful tree species such as Brazil nuts and palms. The evidence suggests that these communities were not simply surviving in the rainforest, they were actively shaping and managing it. The study concludes that the Acre civilization occupied a far larger area than previously recognized, built tens of thousands of earthworks, and may have supported millions of people living in a form of low density or forest urbanism. If similar patterns are discovered elsewhere in the Amazon, archaeologists may have to rethink not only the region's pre-colonial population, but also the long-term human influence on the rainforest itself, with implications for biodiversity, conservation, and even climate models. These were not cities in the traditional sense, with dense streets and towering buildings, but a different form of urbanism, one based around networks, ceremonial centres, and connections across the landscape. The use of Lidar has shown us that the rainforest is not hiding an empty landscape, but a deeply human one. While there are still many questions about exactly how these communities lived, how they organized themselves, and how they interacted with their environment, this ongoing research is helping us to learn more and more about what life was like in the ancient Amazon. Let me know what you think about the ancient Amazon in the comments. I think I need to do a video on the rock art as well, because that is such an amazing subject. Thank you for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.